Wounded masculine. The wounded masculine is incredible fields to be in. And it's interesting. Something opened yesterday, and that is where the wounded masculine doesn't even know he's wounded and cannot accept he's wounded because that would be weak in the system. So there's a huge lock in the system that I want to work with where our ancestors don't even know that they're in pain and that they are suffering. So it's very important to work with these locks and blocks from working with oneself and feeling oneself and even acknowledging that I need support. It's not too long ago that, I know in my time, even, it was not my parents, my ancestors, my aunts and uncles, it was unheard of to ask for treatment or that I have an issue or I need to look at a problem or I have trauma in the system. It's like pull yourself together, you know, pull yourself together. Men don't cry, men stand up for themselves. Men don't show their feelings, their emotions. So these are huge wounds in the system, which we need to address and take a look at in the system. So the parts of us that don't are lying to ourselves that there was an issue here. This is really, really important and very toxic in the wounded masculine. So in the wounded masculine, we're going to go into opening up the systems and talking with the ancestors and having a talk with them to really resolve the pain that they're carrying, the suffering they're carrying, or where maybe they were in war with someone you're working with or living with now. So it's like they had different belief systems, they had different experiences. So the wounded masculine was a collection of wounds which maybe was needed at specific moments in history. And they didn't have time to connect their emotions because they had to get the food on the table or they were starving, so there's different reasons. So let's work with them as a team. And I invite you before the webinar to really look at the parts of you that is telling yourself that I'm okay, I don't need help, I'm not hurting, I'm not in pain, or I'm not hurting others. And maybe you're deflecting or making yourself busy or putting on the radio or distracting yourself from what's really in your nervous system, really in your emotional body, or this deep, deep, deep resentment or this deep rage in the system, blazing rage, where it's like a spring pushed down for generations and now it wants to come up. So there's high blood pressure or outbursts and destruction. So these are the fields I want to take a look at in this webinar, because if you don't resolve them now, it's going to keep coming up. So these are very, very big fields. The webinar I'm doing on the wounded feminine and the gifts of the feminine, the wounded masculine, the gifts of the masculine, are immense fields of information. These are not small fields at all. These are huge generational wounds and collective wounds, and they're playing out in our lives right now, and they're playing out in the collective shadow right now. So it's very important to address these fields in a really respectful way. That's why there's 4 webinars only on the wounds, and then there's going to be 4 webinars of the gifts of the masculinity. So let's resolve what's in our system. And maybe you are part of the feminine wounds. And I really would say you need to also work with the masculine wounds in the system. It's not enough to work with the feminine wounds. You have both in your system. And if you have resistance from coming into this webinar, even more reason to go into the system. So the feminine wounds and the masculine wounds are very, very important to address and to balance in the system and work equally in the system. It's about balance in both systems. The feminine, masculine in ourselves. It's not about are you a man or a woman. It's within ourselves. The program's in ourselves. A lot of the time, for example, you find that men went to war and gave their place to the women, and the women never had the opportunity to give it back because the men came back traumatized, and they never acknowledged that they were traumatized. They never acknowledged that they were in deep, deep trauma. So this is where we passed the imbalance within the system, and it's in our blood. It's in our ancestral line, this disconnect. So I invite you to really acknowledge, dig a little bit into your ancestral line and see how the wounded masculinity is playing out in your ancestral line, how it plays out in your life, how it played out with your parents, how it plays out with your godparents, your uncles, your aunts, your siblings, your children. How are you doing with your wounded masculine today? Look at the system and be brave to look at the system and see how it's playing out for you. And where is it active and where is it inactive? Where are you disconnected from your emotional body, for example? Where are you okay with corruption? You know, a lot of the ancestors had to do corruption to bring food to the table. So they're saying it's okay, just feed the family. It's okay what you do on the outside. I won't ask questions. So there's a lot of covenants in the system, agreements where the family made with maybe mafia, for example, and then the wives were feeding the children. So they're part of, the wives are part of the system too. So we need to address all this ancestral lies, disrespect, and they were doing the best they could. But really, we need to look into the systems deeper and dig deeper into the system. So I invite you to look at the wounded masculine within your own system, within your own ancestral line, within your own relationship with yourself, with your partner, with your children, with your friends, with society, and how is that playing out for you in your life right here, right now? Because that will be a reflection or what's happening around you in the wounded masculine. If it's not inside, it's going to play out in your life and the people around you. How are you doing with your wounded masculine in your life system? How is it affecting you? How is it playing out? Bring it to the surface and we'll address it in the webinar and go deeper and really heal the system. So I look forward to seeing you at the webinar. These are big fields. There's probably huge resistance from going into these fields because they are huge fields. They are big, and we have with the wounded masculine. The wounded masculine does not know he needs support, does not know he's in pain, does not know he needs to be in the webinar, does not know that he needs support. The wounded masculine has no idea and will not go there. He will go to the pub and get drunk. He will distract himself with porn, with football, whatever it is, but he will not face what's in the system. This is the wounded masculine. So where is that playing out in your life at the moment? Where are you distracting yourself in the system? Money, power, fame, whatever's in the system. Have a look. I invite you, and I'll see you at the webinar over the weekend. Thank you. And if you didn't bring in, if you were not working with the feminine, the wounded feminine, I really would recommend that. These are huge fields that we all have these topics. All our ancestors have these topics, so they need to be addressed. They're really big fields for transformation and healing and clearing your own system. Otherwise, they'll play out in your life. So enjoy.